Stonehenge is thought to come from the Old English or Saxon word Stanhengen, which means stone hanging, because it kind of resembles what gallows looked like in the Middle Ages. You had two uprights with a crossbeam.
Ground radar just exposed a massive hidden complex under Stonehenge, and the discovery is truly beyond belief.
Some of the stones at Stonehenge weigh between 50 and 70 tons. Some of the stones are even heavier. So how could you have moved these into place? How could you have moved them from Wales, where the blue stones, the spotted dolerite, came from within Stonehenge?
The pulses revealed that the entire landscape was engineered into a giant machine that we are only now starting to see. Researchers found enormous buried shafts and secret pathways that suggest a level of technology that shouldn't exist in the Stone Age. It is a mystery that has defeated experts for 300 years, but the radar just solved it in a way that is honestly quite scary. The truth about Stonehenge is finally out, and it is much bigger and more complex than anyone ever imagined. The massive buried ring. The team of researchers expected to find the usual things like old post holes or forgotten trash pits, but what happened next made everyone stop breathing. When they ran the final survey of the hidden landscapes, Project the Radar sent back images of something massive and deliberate. 3 feet below the earth, they found evidence of the largest prehistoric structure ever seen in Britain, and no one had a clue it was there. This was not a small find, because the data showed 20 enormous shafts arranged in a perfect mathematical circle. Each one of these shafts was over 30 feet wide and 15 feet deep, which is huge for people with only deer antlers for tools. These pits formed a circle that spanned more than a mile, and it was centered perfectly on a site called Durrington Walls. Modern surveyors would have a hard time being this accurate without using a high-tech satellite system. We are talking about errors measured in inches across a distance of thousands of feet, which is just wild. Dr. Richard Bates from the University of St. Andrews had to check the numbers over and over because he could not believe his eyes. He realized that hunter-gatherers or simple farmers could not have done this without some kind of high-level organization. The technology used here sends electromagnetic pulses into the ground, and they bounce back when they hit something solid or a change in soil density. This allowed them to see the whole subsurface map without ever picking up a shovel or damaging the grass. And get this, the shafts were just the start of the surprises. As the team looked further, they found 17 more structures that no one knew existed. There were massive timber posts that once stood in huge circles and pits that mirrored the patterns of the stars in the sky. It became clear that the stones we see today were just the tiny center of a massive engineered landscape. The whole area was like a giant ceremonial highway designed to move people in a very specific way. But here's the catch. The biggest secret was still waiting right under the stones themselves. The ancient sonic weapon. For a long time, people visiting Stonehenge said they felt weird things like a low vibration or a strange energy in their chests. Most scientists just laughed and said it was all in their heads because they wanted to feel something magical. But the ground radar changed the game because it showed that the engineering was much more complex than anyone thought. In 2020, an acoustic engineer named Trevor Cox decided to build a perfect model of the monument using a 3-dimensional printer. He put the model in a special room that blocks out all outside noise so he could test how sound moves through the stones. What he found was so strange that he had to stop the test and check his equipment for errors. Inside the stone circle, the sound lasted for half a second, which made voices sound richer and much more powerful. It was like the stones were built to give someone a voice of divine authority that would wrap around the listeners. If you step just 1 foot outside the circle, that whole effect just vanished like a light switch being turned off. Neolithic homes were usually very quiet, and the open fields would just let sound blow away in the wind, but Stonehenge was different. It was a contained sonic environment that was unlike anything else in the entire world. The crazy part is that even though there are so many flat stone surfaces there, were almost no sharp echoes inside. The builders had arranged the inner stones to break up reflections from the outer ring with perfect precision. That kind of acoustic design does not happen by accident, because it requires a deep understanding of how sound works. Another researcher named Rupert Till found that some of the blue stones actually ring like bells when you hit them. He discovered that the layout of the stones generates infrasound, which is a frequency so low that you cannot hear it with your ears. You can only feel it in your body, and it is known to cause feelings of unease or even primal fear in humans. So here's the deal. They were not just building with rocks, they were engineering human emotions. The 700-mile voyage. The discovery of the sound engineering made everyone realize that these ancient people were way smarter than we gave them credit for. But the next big shock came in late 2024, when researchers looked at the altar stone in the center. A team led by Anthony Clark used a high-tech machine to look at tiny mineral grains inside the stone slab. They were measuring isotope ratios, which are like a chemical fingerprint for where a rock comes from. The results were so shocking that they had to run the test 3 times to make sure it was not a mistake. The minerals matched a geological formation that only exists in northeastern Scotland, which is over 700 miles away. Dr. Robert Ixer, who has studied these stones for decades, was stunned into silence when he saw the data. This discovery was a total bomb, because moving a 6-ton stone overland across ancient Britain was basically impossible. Back then, the land was covered in thick forests and huge swamps with no roads or bridges to use. This means the Neolithic engineers had to be masters of the sea to get that rock to the Salisbury Plain. They must have loaded a 6-ton stone onto a specially built boat and sailed it along a dangerous rocky coastline. This would require knowing about tides and currents and using the stars for navigation hundreds of miles from home. They did this 5,000 years ago without any metal tools or even a written language to keep notes. And it was not just one rock, because they brought blue stones from Wales and huge sarsen stones from the hills nearby. Each type of stone was picked for its special magnetic or acoustic properties and brought from huge distances. This proves that these people had a massive trade network and organization skills that rivaled the Roman Empire. They were doing this 1,000 years before the pyramids in Egypt were even finished, which is just incredible to think about. What most people don't realize is that these rocks were actually pointing toward a hidden code in the sky, the 20-year lunar clock. Most people know that Stonehenge lines up with the sun on the longest day of the summer, because thousands of people go there to see it. But the ground radar and new computer models proved that the summer solstice was just a tiny part of the story. Beneath the obvious solar alignment there was a much more complex celestial code built into the landscape. When scientists mapped out the buried pathways and the giant ring of shafts they found, they were all pointing at the sky. Some of these features lined up perfectly with something called a major lunar standstill. This is a very rare event that only happens once every 18.6 years, when the moon reaches its most extreme spots on the horizon. To build something that tracks an 18-year cycle, you need to keep records for a very long time. This means the ancient people had a way to pass down complex math and star charts through many generations. They were not just making rough guesses, because the alignments are mathematically exact. Some of the stone positions pointed at parts of the sky that look empty today, but they were not empty 5,000 years ago. Because the Earth wobbles on its axis, the stars move very slowly over thousands of years. When the researchers reconstructed the star maps from the past, they saw that the stones were a perfect snapshot of the heavens. It was like the entire monument was a massive astronomical computer made of rock and earth. Dr. Amanda Chadburn said that these people were tracking celestial mechanics with a precision that should not have been possible. They were not just looking at the sun to know when to plant seeds in the ground. They were watching the entire clockwork of the universe and encoding it into the very soil of Britain. Yeah, about that. Someone had to be in charge of all this crazy math and hard labor. The precision engine of control. The more the researchers found out, the more they started to feel a bit uncomfortable about the true nature of Stonehenge. For a long time, we like to think of it as a place where peaceful tribes came together to build something beautiful. It was a nice story about teamwork and harmony in the ancient world, where everyone wanted to help out. But the ground radar and the math tell a much darker and more intense story of power. Building something this big and this accurate would have taken thousands of workers and hundreds of years of constant work. This was not a weekend project for a few friends, because it was an industrial-scale operation. The radar showed that there were no big towns near the site, which means the workers had to be brought in from far away. They were fed and housed and told exactly where to dig and where to place every single heavy rock. This points to a very strong central authority, like an elite class of rulers who kept all the secrets to themselves. They were the only ones who knew the star math and the sound secrets, and they used that to control everyone else. The rocks from Scotland and Wales were likely not gifts, but rather things taken by force from other groups of people. This means the rulers of Stonehenge had a reach that covered the entire island of Britain with a very tight grip. Stonehenge itself might have been a tool for psychological control over the masses. Imagine walking into a circle where the sounds are weirdly loud and your body starts vibrating with a fear you can't explain. The leaders would look like they had magic powers because they could control the very air people were breathing. They weren't just priests because they were engineers who knew how to manipulate the human mind using physics. The crazy part is that we are only now starting to understand the message they left behind. The whole picture is finally coming together, and it is much more complex than any of us ever dreamed. Ground radar has shown us that Stonehenge is not just a circle of rocks, but the center of a massive buried empire. We found 17 hidden structures and a giant ring of pits that prove these people were masters of math and earth moving. The acoustic tests showed they could manipulate sound to make people feel awe or terror without even knowing why. We now know they sailed massive rocks for 700 miles using advanced navigation skills we thought were invented much later. They tracked the moon and the stars across decades with a precision that is honestly hard to wrap your head around. Everything we found points to a society that was highly organized and ruled by a powerful group with secret knowledge. Professor Gaffney said it best when he said that we spent centuries thinking these people were primitive, but we were totally wrong. They knew things about the world that we are only just now starting to rediscover with our best technology. They built this monument to last for thousands of years, so that one day we would be smart enough to read the message. The radar finally peeled back the layers of dirt, but the biggest question is still waiting for an answer. Why did they go to all this trouble to leave us a message in the stars and the sound? It feels like they were trying to tell us something important, or maybe even warn us about something coming. Some secrets take 5,000 years to be revealed, and it looks like our time is finally here. Stonehenge is not a tomb or a temple, but a giant machine made of stone and frequency. Are we ready to admit that ancient humans were much more advanced than us? Or are we still missing the most important detail? Subscribe for more and tell me what you think. Would you like me to generate a 3D diagram of the hidden shafts?